eyeshadow palette collection video. My eyeshadow palette collection has grown since the last time I actually filmed an eyeshadow palette collection. I decided to take all of my palettes out of my drawer and show you guys that way rather than going through all the palettes with my phone in one hand and then trying to open every palette with my other hand out of the boxes. So I really just wanted to show you guys like this on the floor, laying all my palettes out and showing you guys what I actually have. So most of these are high-end brands, and then we have a couple of indie brands mixed in here. But I just took out like my most recognizable palettes at first, and we're just going to go through those at first. I'm going to tilt the screen up a little bit so it's easier for me to show you guys, because it's just easier for me to keep it face up like this, but I just wanted to show you a brief overview of what I had first, and then I will go through every single palette and show you guys. So why don't we start off with the Naked palettes. They're the most recognizable palettes. I do have one other one that's not shaped like this, but I'm just going to go through my Naked palettes first. So of course we're going to start with the OG, the original eyeshadow palette for any brand was the Urban Decay Naked palette. So many people own this palette because it is a very special palette to a lot of people, and honestly I love this velvet packaging, and it's a great palette. I love that it folds all the way over, and this is what the palette looks like. It is a beautiful palette. Sorry, my brightness wasn't really turned up. Now you can see what it actually looks like. I still whip this palette out and use it when I can. I love the shimmers in this palette. It's still one of my favorite Naked palettes. It's a beautiful neutral palette. I just do wish that there were more mattes in here. I do appreciate that Urban Decay is putting more mattes in their palettes now. This one, of course, changed the makeup game for a lot of brands, and really just started the whole eyeshadow palette trend for so many brands. It really is crazy that there wasn't really any eyeshadow palettes before this came out, and pretty much Urban Decay just, you know, changed the game and really just made brands step up with eyeshadow palettes, and now there's really not any brand that doesn't have eyeshadow palettes. But it is crazy that it used to not be a huge thing for the makeup world. And then my very first Naked palette was the Urban Decay Naked 3 palette. This basically started it all for me when it came to my makeup obsession. This was my very first, everything's going to be reversed in this video, I'm sorry, I think it will correct it when it's on YouTube. But this started it all for me. This palette has extreme nostalgic value to me. I could never get rid of this palette. I could never declutter it because it started my whole like makeup journey, collecting makeup, and I just love this palette. It might not have the best formula, but I just always thought this palette was so beautiful. It's just such beautiful shimmers, and I do appreciate that there's a couple more mattes in here, but all these shimmers are so stunning. I haven't whipped it out and used it in quite a long time, but this palette can never leave my collection. It will always stay in my collection. I do not have the Naked 2 palette. I actually just recently decluttered for the second time. I gave that palette to somebody else because it just has always been my least favorite Naked palette. So, love the Naked 3. Can't say any more good things about it. It's definitely a special palette to me. But I did collect the Naked palettes in reverse. I got the Naked 3 palette first, then I got the Naked 2, and then for some reason I got the Naked palette last. And I definitely fell in love more with the Naked palette than I did the Naked 3 palette. Obviously that's why, and plus I could never get rid of the Naked palette. So, and then my next Naked palette is the Urban Decay Naked Heat palette. You guys know this is my favorite Naked palette. It's just such a beautiful palette. It has such beautiful warm tones in here. When I think of a classic warm neutral palette, I always think of this palette because I do think this is one of their best palettes. Again, this really started the whole matte trend for Urban Decay, and this is when they really stepped up their Naked palettes to put more mattes in here, because I think probably a lot of people were asking them to put mattes in their palettes more. And they put a ton of options of mattes in here. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 mattes, and you have 5 shimmers, and I think that's a really great balance. I kind of wish there would have been one more shimmer shade in here, probably like a lighter, like gold orange. I thought that would have been sick. That would have been really pretty. And you could have replaced it with like one of these outer corner shades here. But these are all stunning outer corner shades, and the lid shades are just as pretty, but you guys know I love the Heat palette. Then the next one is, of course, the Naked Cherry palette. This one was gifted to me by Moment with Chip. And I love this palette. I've used it so much since she gifted it to me. I do whip it out and use it when I can, and it's such a beautiful palette. I'm kind of torn as to which palette I want to use today, because I kind of want to do like a berry tone look for work. And I'm not sure if I want to use this palette, my Huda Beauty palette, the new nude one, or my new Storybook Cosmetics one, because I've been whipping out more palettes recently and using older palettes, but I also haven't done a pink look with this palette in such a long time, so... But again, love this palette. I love the difference between the color scheme in here. There's definitely more differentiation with the color scheme in here than in the Naked Heat palette. It's not as monochromatic. You can go any direction. You can go very neutral. You can go peachy. You can go pinky, but you can also go brown and smoky. So it does have a ton of different options in here. Again, I've said this a million times. I wish this was called the Raspberry palette, not the Cherry palette, because... But at the same time, cherries are dark red, but why didn't they put a dark red in the palette? So we're not going to go through that whole thing again, but I love this palette. And then the last Naked palette in this packaging is the, of course, newest addition to the Naked line, which is the Naked Honey palette. And this is probably my favorite one. Formula-wise, this palette is amazing. This is, of course, one of their best palettes ever. I really can't believe I was thinking about not getting this palette. I am so glad that I did, because this palette is stunning. And it's just, the formula is so beautiful. The shimmers are amazing, and I love it. And it is a little bit more monochromatic than the Naked Cherry palette, but the color story is so stunning. The shimmers are beautiful, and the mattes blend like a dream. So I love this palette as well. Okay, so that's it for Urban Decay right now. Now let's go through some of my Too Faced palettes. So of course I have some of the classic palettes from Too Faced as well. So the first one, of course, is the OG Chocolate Bar palette. I don't collect Too Faced palettes anymore, but this was when I was a huge fan of Too Faced. They used to be my favorite brand. Now not so much anymore, but this palette, I would be lying if I said this still isn't a great palette. I think it's actually better quality than the Naked palette. I find that these eyeshadows still perform just as well as when I first got it than these ones do. I feel like the Urban Decay formula goes bad a little bit faster, but the Chocolate Bar palette is an OG classic, and I absolutely love the lid shades in here, and the mattes are super buttery and blendable. But the shimmers in here, the two shimmers I love is Marzipan and, what's the gold one called? I hate this little insert thing. The gold one is called Creme Brulee. Creme Brulee. Creme Brulee. And they're both absolutely stunning. They're just such beautiful shimmers. So that's the Too Faced Chocolate Bar. Then, of course, I have the Too Faced Semi-Sweet Chocolate Bar. It's so funny that this used to be like one of my favorite palettes ever, and now I'm just like, it's okay. Like, I don't really think the color scheme is anything really that special, and I feel like the lid shades don't perform as well as the Chocolate Bar palette does. I actually think the Chocolate Bonbons palette is better than this palette now, and I do end up using the Bonbons palette over this one more and the Chocolate Bar palette, so I end up reaching for those a hell of a lot more than this one. But this one was my first Chocolate Bar palette. I think I bought this myself like a day or two before Valentine's Day. Like, after I had gotten the Naked 3 palette from my boyfriend, I really wanted the 2 Chocolate Bar palettes, so I got this one for myself. And then, he bought this one for me for Valentine's Day. I was like, I want this palette for Valentine's Day, so he bought this for me. And then literally, like, not even 2 days or maybe even a day later, I bought the Chocolate Bar palette. I bought it myself. So my boyfriend bought me the Naked 3, and he bought me the Semi-Sweet. And then after that, he just stopped buying me makeup. He's like, I'm not buying you any more makeup. I'm like, it's fine. He did, like, in Sephora, he did buy me, he let me pick out quite a few, like, high-end makeup brands, like Burberry, Giorgio Armani. He let me, like, kind of do a little shopping spree in the city and let me pick out quite a few makeup items from Sephora there. So that was really fun. But yeah, he did get me that palette as well. You know what? You know what's funny is that I was thinking about decluttering this, but then I kind of totally forgot that he had bought me this one. So I can't declutter this because it's something that he bought me. So this is staying in my palette collection forever. I can't believe I forgot about that. I could have sworn he bought me the chocolate bar, but I think it was the Semi-Sweet because I wanted the Semi-Sweet a lot more. I gotta check on that. But either way, they're really not leaving my collection because these are still really, really good formulas. So, and then the last one that I got from the chocolate bar line was the Chocolate Bonbons palette. And I actually just whipped this out yesterday and used this in my latest video for Chip's gender reveal prediction video. So go check that out. And I did do a look with this guy. And after using it yesterday, it really has a great formula. The shimmers are really beautiful. And I just used a few of the pinks this time for a look, and it turned out really nice. So this is still a great palette as well. So love that too, and my nails kind of match it, as you can see, because Valentine's Day was yesterday. Okay, and then the next one, and my last Too Faced palette I ever got, was during the whole Sweet Peach palette craze. So this is obviously the Sweet Peach palette, and this is what it looks like. I love the ombre peach packaging. It is really pretty. This palette is a good one too. It is really nice. I actually think that this is my favorite one out of these bigger palettes because I like that it gives you a ton more options. Color-wise, I like that they made it like just 6, 12, 18 eyeshadows, which is a really good option and a really good price. I mean, have a lot of options color-wise in this palette, which I really do like. It's a good palette. I like it a lot. This Luscious shade is so stunning. That's my favorite shade in the palette. So yeah, it's a good palette. I think that this has a great formula as well. So that is it for those. And then the last one from Too Faced in like the bigger packaging is the Glitter Bomb palette. And I actually found this at Marshall's or TJ Maxx. So I didn't pay, it was only $15. And I don't know, I was just super interested in trying this palette. I was like, you know what, I kind of want to add a few more like glitters to my collection. And I don't really whip out this palette too often, to be honest, but it is actually a really beautiful palette. The glitters in here are actually really great. I love Rosé All Day. I love Fairy Dust. Work It, Oh It's On, those are all beautiful. The purples are a little bit harder to work with because they're purples, but overall it's a nice palette. I have used all of them, and I like using them as glitter toppers on occasion, so it is a nice palette. So that's it from Too Faced. And then a couple of my smaller square palettes. The first one is the NARS Narcissus palette. This is my only NARS eyeshadow palette because I was very interested in trying NARS eyeshadows for a while, so I finally bought a NARS palette quite a bit ago. If I could open this, that'd be great. That's the struggle of having nails. So this is what it looks like. It has that cool mirrored packaging. And then this is the palette. This is a really nice palette. I think that this would be a really good palette for travel. It's a really nice one that you can just throw in your bag. And it's just really, like, small and compact, but this palette's really pretty as well. I really like it. I love all the shimmers in here. They're beautiful, and the mattes perform really well. So this is a really good palette as well. It's just, you know, NARS is really pricey. And then speaking of pricey palettes, I also have a Viseart palette. This is the Warm Neutral Matte palette. Warm Matte palette, sorry. One of the eyeshadows did get busted. I did drop it. But I think I've had this in my collection for 2 years at least, and that's how long these are supposed to last. But, you know, I keep eyeshadow palettes forever. Like, am I gonna really declutter eyeshadow palettes that I spent $75 on? No. These mattes are stunning. They are such a beautiful formula. It took me a while to fall in love with this palette, but I'm so happy that I did buy it. I mean, probably now I would be like, I don't really need it, but it is a really great matte palette. These are great mattes. They are worth the price to me. And then, the last one I'm going to show in this first round of palettes is the Lion King Sir John and Luminous Can't Wait to Be Clean eyeshadow palette. I did rank this one around like 6 or 7 in my most recent palettes from 2019. I ranked the Honey palette around much higher. But this is a stunning palette as well. Like I've said like a million times when I talk about this palette was so much better than the movie. Like, this palette is stunning. The shimmers in here are beautiful, and the mattes are stunning as well. Have a great formula. I actually just whipped this out like a week or so ago, and I finally used like one of the colorful shades, and the green is so stunning, so I'm glad that I've whipped this out a couple of times recently. So now let's pull out some other palettes. Okay, so now let's go through some of these larger palettes. So I'm just going to show you a quick overview really quick, and now we're going to go through these. So let me, oh my god, I don't want you to see my face. We'll probably cut that out. So anyway, let's go through some of these palettes. So I have some more like indie brand palettes. So let's start with Lime Crime. So this is the Venus 1 palette. And I know that Lime Crime does get a pretty bad rep. Like, not a lot of people are actually fans of them anymore. But you can't deny that they do have a amazing eyeshadow formula. Hold on one sec. My water is kind of like making me nervous. It was kind of like on top of one of my bracelets, and I'm like, nope. So yeah, this is beautiful. I actually just whipped this out recently, like last week, and the mattes are ridiculously beautiful. And I've actually whipped out both of my Lime Crime palettes again, and their formula is still amazing. I love this palette. But like I said, the Venus XL would be my choice over this one. I mean, I really don't need this palette, but I do really like it when I want to go with warm tones, and I do use it a lot in the summertime because it has beautiful warm tones in it, so I love it. I did recently declutter the Venus 2 palette, like not too long ago, because I just felt I really didn't need it. I didn't really love the color scheme in it. I only bought it to like collect it at first when I got that one, but I definitely prefer the colors in this one over that one. And then the Big Daddy is the Venus XL palette, and you guys know I just talked about this and I used it in me and Marley's live stream video, so go check that out. We did recently do a live stream together, and this is what it looks like. And sorry the lighting's like changing in my room constantly, but you guys can see what it looks like. It's stunning. I love this palette. I love how big it is. I love how many options you get in it. And I just love this palette. I just used it for work for a Valentine's Day look. And Lime Crime eyeshadows are bomb. I love them. Okay, then I have two Natasha Denona palettes. I do have two smaller ones as well, but I'll just go through the bigger ones. So the first one is the Natasha Denona Gold palette. I did not pay for this myself. I actually exchanged a bunch of stuff that got sent to me twice from Chip, or was actually a box that got sent to her, and then she sent me those products because I needed to have them reship her order when we did our makeup swap, and she sent me back the items, and I returned some of them, and I decided to get this palette, and I was never going to pay full price for this palette, but I really wanted to try Natasha Denona eyeshadows, and everyone said that her bigger eyeshadows were better than her smaller ones, and this palette is beautiful. I love it. I love it for gold options. As you can see, I've used it a ton. It is a stunning palette. The golds in here are so beautiful, but for a gold palette, you would think there would be more golds in here, but I do love the color scheme in this palette. I think it's very unique. I don't think you really see like these colors put together very often, like neutrals and blues. And I don't think there's too many pop factors in this palette. I think that the blues make this different. And it's just a really gorgeous palette. I think this is one of her best palettes, so I love it. But the one that I said I would pick over that one would be, of course, the Sunrise palette. I am a sucker for warm tones. I mean, I love gold. I really do love gold colors, but I do love warm neutral palettes more. So this is not exactly a warm neutral palette. It's like a warm neutral palette with a twist. It has some beautiful warm tones in here and also some beautiful berry tones. Maybe I should use this palette today. I don't know. I'm so torn because I really want to do a berry look, but there's just not enough options of colors in here for me. With those colors, I mean, there are a couple of shades I could use, but I have to think about it. But it's so stunning. Every single color in the Natasha Denona palettes are so blendable, and the shimmers are ridiculous. So, you guys know I love this palette too. Okay, now let's do some of the other brands first before we jump into ColourPop. So, the next palette and the most recent addition to my collection, besides the Storybook Cosmetics palette from Marley, this was the last palette that I purchased myself in 2019, and this is the House Laboratories The Fame eyeshadow palette. Honestly, I really did not want to purchase any more palettes after I got the ColourPop palettes that I'm going to talk about very soon. In November of last year, this was my last one, and I got this in December, but I couldn't resist getting a palette from Gaga because I am such a huge Lady Gaga fan. Lady Gaga is my favorite artist ever. I love her. I had the opportunity to meet her a couple times. She is so stunning in person, and she's such a beautiful soul. She's actually really quiet in person, and she's just so sweet and very reserved in person, which I love. She's just awesome. She's my idol. I love her so much. And I just could not wait for her makeup line to come out, and I think that this palette is really nice. I think it's really nice for people that want to experiment with color, but also need those everyday eyeshadows, so I think it has a really nice formula. So that is her first eyeshadow palette. I can't wait to see what she does next. Then we have another palette that was gifted to me from Chip, and this is the Huda Beauty New Nude palette. I was thinking about using this palette today as well, but most people know that I will not support Huda Beauty, but she sent me this palette, and I ended up really, really loving it. This is actually a stunning palette. The formula is really beautiful. The shimmers are stunning, and the mattes blend so beautifully. So it kind of annoys me how much I really like this palette, but like I said, if this didn't have the name Huda Beauty on it, I probably would have purchased it because the color scheme is so beautiful. So that's that one. But she did send that to me in our makeup swap as well. And I will leave her channel linked below because she did gift me a couple of palettes. She's actually the only person that has gifted me makeup palettes. Every other palette I've bought myself. Then we have Colored Rain. We have the Colored Rain Queen of Hearts palette. This is when the Colored Rain palette was super hyped up, and everyone and their mom was talking about this palette. But this palette is talked about for a reason. It is a beautiful formula. These shimmers are ridiculous. They're so stunning. This is still one of my favorite palettes. I love this palette. I definitely love this palette over the Juvia's Place, but this was the only palette that I really wanted to try from Colored Rain. I do like their liquid lipsticks as well. I kind of want to try a couple other products from them, but again, I am really trying to just not buy any makeup right now, and I've been doing a pretty good job. I usually do pretty good around the, beginning of the year in, January and February, because I really don't feel like there's anything I'm too interested in that have been released recently. I'm more interested in stuff that has come out a while back that I still want. But this is a great palette as well. And then before I jump into ColourPop, because literally there's 9 ColourPop palettes in front of me, so the other 2 aren't ColourPop. So the first one is the Jouer Skinny Dip palette. You guys know that I love this palette. These are such beautiful foiled shadows. Again, If you're looking for foiled eyeshadows, that you don't want too much color, but you want something that adds like a beautiful glitter topper. These are such stunning glitter toppers, but they're also so stunning by themselves. They're the most metallic shadows. They are so stunning. I love this palette. I was seriously so shocked on how beautiful these eyeshadows are. They are amazing. That's the only eyeshadow palette that I have from Jouer. And then my favorite drugstore palette is the Milani Pure Passion palette. This is my only palette from Milani, but I was dying to try their eyeshadows in their palettes. This would be a nice eyeshadow palette to use today too. I'm literally so torn. I'm probably going to end up going with the Storybook Cosmetics one because I have not used that more than like, I haven't used the lid shades more than once on my lids, so I kind of want to use them again. But this palette is amazing. It is such a beautiful drugstore palette, and I did include this in my top 10 favorites. It's such a great formula. Milani makes stunning products from the drugstore. I kind of want to do a full Milani look. I kind of need to do that, but then I would need to purchase another foundation from them, and I'm not like too crazy over their foundations, but everything else that I have from them, the only thing I haven't tried is mascaras and eyeliners from them, but I kind of want to do a video where I do use a lot of Milani products, including obviously this palette. It's such a great palette. Okay, so now let's jump into my ColourPop palettes. So let's go in order of when I got them. So my very first ColourPop palette was the ColourPop and Kathleen Light's Dream Street palette, and this is still one of my favorites. I'm not going to bore you too much with talking about it, but you guys know how much I love this palette. It pretty much started me with my palette craze from ColourPop. They make bomb eyeshadows. Their eyeshadows are just amazing, so you guys know how much I love this palette, and I'm trying to hit pan on one or two shades in the sky. So I love this palette, and you guys know how much I love Kathleen Light's palettes from ColourPop. And then the second one I got was the Zodiac palette, which is also by Kathleen Lights. This would also be a really pretty palette to use today too, but I'm not going to use this one. I actually haven't whipped this out in quite a while because I do show this palette a ton of love. There are stages where I use this palette a ton. It's a very unusual palette. Again, I do like her unusual color schemes with ColourPop. So, and I was so excited for her to come out with a Zodiac collection because I love Zodiac signs, and I just thought the packaging was ridiculously stunning. I love this packaging, and this palette is beautiful. I love the gold. I love the blue. They're so beautiful. I love Scorpio. Oh my god, it's such a pretty palette. When I first got it, I was obsessed with the shade Leo because obviously that's my sign. I think I wore it for like 2 or 3 days straight on my lids because I couldn't get enough of it and then I bought the Zodiac pigments and I got the Leo pigment, and those ended up becoming my favorite pigments ever, but this palette is great as well. And then the next ColourPop palette that I got was the It's a Princess Thing palette, and this was their first Disney collaboration palette. And this palette is stunning as well. I love the packaging on it. I mean, come on. Could a Disney lover ask for anything more than having 6 princesses that are so awesome? I love I love all the princesses. I mean, I'm such a Disney fan. So this is what this one looks like, and again, it is such a stunning palette. This formula kind of blew me away. I didn't think that this palette was going to be as amazing as it actually is. The shimmers in here are ridiculously stunning. All of these shimmers are so beautiful, and the mattes are stunning. Prince Charming is my favorite, and what's this one called? One Kiss. But they are so metallic and beautiful, and I love Ray as well. So these are amazing. I love the Disney palettes from ColourPop, but I think you guys already know that. Mostly all of these palettes are included in my top 10 video, so go check that out. And then let's stick with the Disney palettes real quick, but this was definitely a palette that was added to my collection later than the other palettes, but I just want to stick with the Disney palettes right now. So the next one is the Disney Designer palette in the Midnight Masquerade. And again, I love this palette as well. A lot of people like knock these color schemes before they come out. And then once they try them, they're like, holy crap, this formula is ridiculous. So good. The mattes are beautiful. I just whipped it out and used it again. I've used it quite a few times the past couple of weeks, and I just freaking love this palette. It's so beautiful and stunning. The shimmers, again, are stunning. I love Mrs. Potts. Gaston is such a beautiful matte red. Red is so hard to do, and this is a stunning red. And then New Dream is a beautiful pink. Mama Odie, oh my god, stunning. Love this palette. Every shade is amazing. So that is it for the Disney palettes, besides these two. And then the most recent additions to my Disney collection from ColourPop are the two Frozen 2 palettes. I just couldn't say no to these. I really wanted to not get them, but I'm like, if I don't get these, I'm going to kind of kick myself. And I made my boyfriend watch Frozen 2 yesterday for Valentine's Day. So this is the Anna palette. He had gotten it on his computer like a week or so ago, and we haven't watched it yet. So I was like, I really want to watch it with you. And it would be like, literally Frozen 2 is the only movie that I've watched more than 2 times in the past like 3 years. I really don't watch movies like obsessively anymore, but Frozen 2 has been the movie that I've watched the most. Besides A Star Is Born, they're like the only two that I've watched like more than twice. I've watched them both 3 times, and I'm like, 3 times is enough for me. So this is the Anna palette, of course. It is so freaking stunning, you guys. And I'm going to jump into my other 9-pan palettes, so I kind of wanted to do it in the reverse order, but these are my 2 most recent ones. But I love this palette. So beautiful. I could use this today too, but oh my god, I'm so torn as to what I want to use today. But this is a stunning palette, and the packaging, this is my all-time favorite packaging from ColourPop, is these 2 palettes. They are so beautiful. And then of course we have the Elsa palette as well, and that's what that one looks like. And then this is the colors in this one. So this is the Elsa palette, and this one is beautiful as well. The formula is great, but I do prefer the Anna palette over this one. But I have been using this one quite a bit this past year in January and February, so I could get more use out of it. And I do really love it too. And then my other 2 9-pan palettes, I have the ColourPop Main Squeeze palette. I also need to whip this one out and use it again soon, but I use this palette obviously a lot more in the summertime. This is a great 4th of July palette because it came out for 4th of July. But this was the first 9-pan palette that I had got from ColourPop because I really wanted to try one of them, because this is when they were constantly releasing 9-pan palettes. And this is a really nice palette as well. It's not my favorite from ColourPop because the mattes are a lot drier in these palettes than the Frozen 2 palettes. The mattes aren't as buttery smooth as the 12-pan and like the bigger palettes from ColourPop that I have, but I still love it. It's a great palette, but I just wish that the mattes were a little bit smoother. I do a ranking video of these palettes as well, because most of these palettes I'm sharing with you I got in 2019. Most of the ColourPop palettes I'm showing you right now, I'm pretty sure I got in 2019. Yeah, the Midnight Masquerade, the Main Squeeze, the 2 Frozen palettes, and these last 2 palettes I'm showing you, I got all last year. So the other one is the Honey palette, and I really wanted a new palette for the summertime, and also because this was during my birthday month, or during the month of my birthday, obviously, duh. And I just thought that this would be such an awesome palette for the summertime as well. But I had also gotten the Sunrise palette like the month before that, and then the Lion King palette. So I had also gotten these 2 palettes too. So I was pretty much adding 1 or 2 palettes to my collection almost every month. So it was kind of getting ridiculous. But this is a beautiful palette as well. The shimmers in here are stunning. But again, the mattes are a little bit lackluster for me. But it is a really nice palette as well. It's not like I regret buying these. And I kind of was really interested in trying yellow eyeshadows because I don't really have too many yellows in my collection, so I wanted to jump on that trend. And then the last ColourPop palette I have to share with you right now is my beloved Sweet Talk palette. You guys know this is one of my all-time favorites as well. The color scheme in here is just probably the best color scheme they've ever done. This was my spring palette. Obviously, I'd also purchased the Milani palette around the same time and the Beauty Bakery palette. But I love this. I don't really have to talk about it too much. This is probably my all-time favorite palette besides the So Jaded, but this palette is absolutely stunning. So now let's go through some other palettes. Okay, so now let's film the last roundup of what's in this eyeshadow palette drawer, and then I think I'm going to stop filming and just chill for a little while before work. So let's just go through the last roundup. So the last ColourPop palette that I have to share with you guys is obviously my Kathleen Lights and So Jaded eyeshadow palette. You guys know I love this palette. So this is what it looks like, and you guys know this is pretty much my holy grail palette because of how many options you get in this guy. It is amazing. I really don't have to talk about it too much because this formula is ridiculous. The metallics in here are stunning. The mattes in here are stunning. Peridot is my favorite, which is also my birthstone. You can do green looks, you can do blue looks, you can do red looks, you can do neutral looks, you can do purple looks. Stunning. Love this palette so much. And you can do warm tone looks. There's just endless amount of options in this palette. You guys know how much I love it. Now let's move on to some other brands. The next one is my very first and last Beauty Bakery Proof is in the Pudding eyeshadow palette. This palette is beautiful as well. It's a really great neutral palette. I was just dying to try Beauty Bakery's eyeshadows, and these are amazing. I love how this palette is curated. It is such a beautiful neutral palette. It's great for someone that needs a neutral palette for every day. It is a great formula, and I think it's a very universal palette. If I could put this back in here. And then I have one Juvia's Place palette. This is the Mini Masquerade palette. I'm not absolutely head over heels for this palette. You guys know my thoughts on this one. It's a good palette. The shimmers in here are ridiculously stunning. Some of the best shimmers I've tried, honestly. They are so beautiful and buttery. It's just the mattes that I have a problem with. But if you guys are looking for something that will give you neutral options and colorful options, I think that this is a great mix. Just the mattes are incredibly hard to work with. I find that they are extremely dry. I honestly wish that this palette was all shimmer, or I would have waited to try a different palette from them because after this palette came out and I purchased it, like a month later, they had announced the Magic palette, and I thought that that was such a stunning palette, but I didn't want to overwhelm myself with too many eyeshadows. Then I have my one and only Tarte palette. I used to have an older one called the Showstopper Clay palette, but I gave that to Marley. So this is my Tarte Tartlet in Bloom palette. And this is one of the only eyeshadow palettes that I do have pan on. I do have pan on the shade Flower Child, because I do love using that as a transition shade from this palette, so I finally did hit pan on that one. I hit pan on it. My legs are starting to get a little bit tired of being in this position. I hit pan on it like early last year, which I can't believe how long it's been already. I think I hit pan on it literally like right after I'd filmed my palettes that I want to hit pan on. For 2019, I hit pan on it like 2 weeks later. But this is a great palette. It's nice for every day. I do want to try to hit pan on Funny Girl, but I don't pull it out often enough. But I do try and pull it out when I can, and it is a nice neutral palette for every day. Then I do have one Makeup Geek palette, and then of course I have a bunch of single shadows from Makeup Geek, but I still have the Makeup Geek Manny MUA palette. I do think that this palette has a great formula. Of course I used up my beloved Beaches and Cream shade, so it does make me happy to see one shade completely used up in a palette, but you guys know the only reason why that this is used up is because I used up 2 Beaches and Cream before that, and I just wasn't going to repurchase it yet if I knew that it was in this palette. I do have a single shadow in it as well, and it's very well loved again from me. So I've used up 2 before, and then I used up this one, and then I have one that I have pan on, which is my 4th Beaches and Cream. It used to be my all-time favorite transition shade, so I did use this one up completely, but I do love this palette. The formula is beautiful. Makeup Geek makes still a stunning formula. These shimmers are beautiful, and the mattes blend beautifully, so I do really like this palette still. I only keep it because it's Makeup Geek, not because of Manny MUA, because he did turn a lot of people off. Then I do have one more Naked palette from Urban Decay. This is the Naked Ultimate Basics palette. This palette is great as well. I might declutter this though, just because I don't really use it too much anymore. I do think it's a great palette. If I could open this up and not ruin my nails, that'd be great. The heck is the... There it is. So this is what it looks like. Again, the mattes in here have a beautiful formula. These are really, really nice, but honestly, I don't really whip out too many single shadows anymore to pair with this palette, because that's what I would usually do when I use it. I did whip it out, I think, like once last year, but I definitely haven't used it this year yet. It kind of just sits in the back of my drawer, and there are a ton of other palettes that I end up grabbing for, and it's very similar to the Visart palette, so I don't know if I really need it in my collection anymore, but it's a great palette. It has great mattes in here, but I just don't find that I really use it too much anymore. Then I do have one NYX palette. This was the Happy Birthday palette that they gave for your free birthday gift during your birthday month. And obviously Ulta and Sephora both give like birthday gifts during your birthday month. And this is a nice palette. It's really nice. I don't really want to get rid of this because it's pretty exclusive. Like no one else can get it unless you're unless you were getting it from Ulta during that year that they made this their birthday gift. It's a really nice palette. I definitely want to whip it out and use it again soon. And then the last one in that drawer is the Too Faced Sugar Pop palette. I don't really use this too much anymore, but I still love the packaging. I might give this away as well. I think I'm going to start selling stuff on Poshmark because I feel like I would feel better doing that than just giving away eyeshadow palettes. Like I wanted to give palettes to Exo Marley for her to grow her collection, and I gave some palettes away recently to coworkers like a month ago, but since I spent my hard-earned money on these palettes, I need to start selling some of them, then I wouldn't feel as guilty giving them away. So I think I am going to sell a few that I just don't use anymore, because then it can make room for me to try palettes that I really want to try. So I think I'm going to list a few palettes on Poshmark, including this one and the Ultimate Basics palette, I think. So now let's jump into the rest of the palettes. Okay, I just wanted to film an outro for part 1 because I'm going to end it at the last clip that I just showed you guys. So then I'm going to start part 2 and you are going to see that next. So please like and subscribe. Follow me on all my social media. I hope you guys enjoyed the first part, and please stay tuned for the second part of my eyeshadow collection. So bye guys.